Hi there. I see at least one person on here. Can you hear me okay? Zubadia, is that how you say your name? Okay, I see some people coming on. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you maybe give me a thumbs up or hello in the chat? Let me know. Hi, Colleen. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here on your evening. I know you'd probably rather be nestled up on the couch, but I suppose you can nestle and listen as well. But I really appreciate you being here. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Janice. This is sort of a special webinar for health means, and that's going to come with some perks for you guys. You'll hear about later. But we directed this especially to practitioners. So I'd love to hear if you are a practitioner, if you're already working in mold, what you want to learn. I have slides, but it's always fun and helpful to just hear like where you're at in the journey, or maybe you're here more for yourself for your own mold journey, which is totally fine too. I think it's amazing the more, we are creating awareness in this field and creating practitioners who can support people in this field because it's so complicated. So, kind of what I'm learning and seeing more over time is if you only kind of half understand mold, you can be doing a little damage to folks, not knowingly. I did a lot of damage to myself as I was going through my mold journey because I just didn't know a lot of things. I did a lot of mistakes in how we remediated, for example. So, okay, I see Colleen says yes, self and practitioner. Sarah said FDN and molds. Great. Yeah, I think it's a great combo with any kind of functional coaching, functional medicine practice. Although I think it can be kind of worked into a lot of different practices, which we can talk more about if y'all want at the end. Like, I think the health, like a coach specializing in more of the home side, is going to grow. And then, some folks getting into mold are missing some of the foundational health habits. So that's come up too. Um, Emma said she's been through it, or he, and gets clients exposed to mold. Yeah, Daniela said her own journey. Great. Well, as I get into the presentation, you're welcome to write anything you want in the chat and kind of chat with each other. And then I'm going to wait to the end to um, go back and then I'll answer questions. So let me just pull up my slides. Okay, you are in the right place if you're here for this talk. So I will go over these kind of 3 mistakes that I see happening in the mold field and some, little nuggets of information about how I organize a treatment plan. And um, and then this webinar is kind of a prequel to our course that's starting September 6th, which is called Toxic Mold Trained. So it's a live practitioner training course. So if it interests you to hear more about it, I'd love for you to stay on and listen a little bit about it. Even if it doesn't call to you at this time, it's just kind of nice to keep in the back of your head. And I can share other resources that we have as well if you're not ready for this particular step. So, I don't think this webinar is too crazy in depth for practitioner types, but I just encourage all of my students, soon to be students, and my clients as well, to just, it's always good to just like center and tune in, because if I'm giving out a lot of information and a lot of it's new to you, it can feel like you kind of shut down or feel overwhelmed. But just sort of listen lightly, and if there's something that you can take away from this for your own clients or yourself, then that's fantastic. So here's just a quick disclaimer that this is not to diagnose you. My fellow FDNs know that we're careful about this. And this is me. I don't know if some of you have seen me on summits with health means. You probably have. Would love to hear about it if so. But I started my career as an acupuncturist and, didn't really come from a history of my own illness or mold or anything. But I started my practice in Portland, Oregon. And of course, it's very wet, a lot of old buildings, and I was slowly getting sicker there. So I was trying everything under the sun. I really cleaned up my diet. I was learning, I feel like functional medicine and paleo were really big at the time. So I was just learning a lot, but I wasn't ever getting completely better. But in the meantime, oh, wait. I guess we'll tell more about my story later. But yeah, I had a pretty big career running a wellness center there. Well, I was ironically not that well myself. But once I found mold, it was really a big missing piece for me. And I did recover my health and then gradually turned my own practice into more of a detox and then mold practice. So this is Mickey, who is the other coach on our team. And I just thought I'd mention her because if you do end up taking the course with us, you'll see her face. She's not as much like out on public as me, but she's an excellent practitioner with tons of experience. And she's on the East Coast. And she has her own, mold story, but also she had thyroid cancer. She's a total student. Like, she's a wealth of knowledge. Okay, so getting into the content, these are the three categories of mistakes that I see. And the first one's around communication, your relationship with your client. Because as clients go through mold, and if many of you have, it sounds like it's very hard. It's expensive. It's kind of emotionally traumatizing. Your brain is affected. So, one thing I found that I'll share more of in a minute is when I was a client, I didn't always get the reception that I wanted and needed. So, I think that's something that we'll touch on in the course. But really, you'll see from Mickey and I like how we communicate and that kind of a thing. Like, I think that we both kind of excel at creating like a safe space, but also you want a structured space, right? You don't want people like calling you in the middle of the night, walking all over you. So there's different, ways we can approach that. The second one is lack of knowledge on the environmental side, and then sometimes giving bad advice. So we'll talk more about mold versus mycotoxins. And I do hear practitioners kind of giving some bad advice, and especially about belongings that we'll talk about. And then the third category is lack of clinical skills, which is more like, ordering labs, making protocols, that kind of a thing. So, all this is learnable. And everybody, we're all starting somewhere. I remember when I was learning about the thyroid, like how confusing it was and what a big topic it was. So we all have to start somewhere. But these are the kind of areas. And as Mickey and I were, thinking up, uh, you know, things for this course, we have a lot of mistakes we see practitioners make. So I just had to kind of narrow them down into three categories. But yeah, like things like not retesting a home or being too harsh with your treatment plans are things that we've really seen and encountered, and we don't we want to send practitioners out in the world, just being really careful and graceful and how they give a treatment plan. Okay, so going back to that first issue, what I would suggest, or I guess I say first, I see sometimes, lack of active listening, sort of interrupting or not showing emotions, um, and a lack of structure. I'll speak more about that because I can still make that mistake occasionally. Um, Lack of boundaries, we kind of talked about, like overgiving, oversharing. And then lack of resources is really just like when something's beyond your scope, do you have resources to refer out? So the active listening is easy enough, so to speak, to edit in yourself. Resources is something we're going to cover in the course, but as if you're going to do more and more of mold, that people are going to say, well, how do I test for this? Or like, who can I talk to about that? So that's an easy thing to do and to start to build. And then structure, I think it's so important with all our clients. And I definitely see with mold clients to, give them an idea of what your session is going to look like, have them fill out a form ahead of time, because sometimes they end up just kind of vomiting out their whole story on you and you barely get to any actual questions. So there's lots of ways to make holding space, easy. And it's really just setting up kind of systems um, that work, and then just being cognizant, staying cognizant that the person you're working with is a human being going through a very difficult time. And part of what they need is just to know that you're really hearing them and seeing them. So again, when I was in my mold journey, and this was like a really horrible picture of me back in the day, really puffy, so lymph congested. My eyelid was twitching. Um, I would have practitioners just give me different supplements every time. And, if I said I was having a hard time, they'd ask me, do I need the number to a hotline or something, which is a resource. So that's something, but it was like I didn't need that. I just sort of needed something different, right? I needed to just feel validated in a sense. So that can just be an important nugget to take away too, is if people are coming to you as a client, just sort of a little bit overwhelming you with their whole story, just slow them down and like let them know like you really get it, like you get what they're going through. And this is a little bit more like the bigger picture as a clinician. What do you want to create? So I'll just share that when I was working as an acupuncturist, I was a big overgiver. And I was running a clinic. I had a baby. I had a staff. And I gave like 120% to every session. And I kind of burnt out. And then when I went on online, I didn't really want to see clients. So I didn't have a good attitude about it. And I sort of got that back. Um, but more lately, I've been seeing clients again, and again, creating just more structure around how I want it to feel for me. Um, and lo and behold, it's working for me better, and I'm attracting great clients. So I definitely think that whatever kind of clinic you want, if you want to sell packages or you want to have groups or you want to work one on one, anything can be created so that it fits you and that you don't burn out. Okay, second one is environmental knowledge. So let's see. Well, I'll just point out on the left, these are kind of the things that I see as being a problem. I mentioned not really understanding what mycotoxins are and how dangerous belongings can be is a big one that I see. People not really understanding testing, just telling people to get an ERMI test, and then they don't really know how to read that test. And then the top one, black and white thinking, is, sometimes now I'm hearing, oh, well, my practitioner won't work with me if I'm not moved out, or my practitioner won't work with me unless I do X, Y, and Z supplements. And I guess everyone gets to make their own choices. We just talked about creating your clinic how you want. But again, this person's going through a very difficult period. Um, and I've probably gotten a little softer on this too. I certainly think that many people need to move out of the home. I think people need to be more creative and like temporary living and getting into some temporary living. But at the same time, I'm not going to shame someone or turn someone down. I'm going to try to work with them where they're at. Now, it's one thing if there's just a relationship is not working out, it's not healthy. Um, but yeah, I think again, it's kind of obliges us as holistic practitioners to look at the whole person's situation and not, shame them if they don't have the money for a certain thing. So on the environmental side, there's so many angles, and for better or worse, as a health practitioner, people will be asking you some of these questions, and you don't have to have like a perfect knowledge about the home because there's so much, there's a lot to it, but at least you should have a working knowledge. So you're giving people, good advice. Because if you're just sort of spitballing advice, you might be completely wrong. So, again, having resources you can refer people to, just understanding a little bit about the home and airflow and moisture, um, cleaning pros and cons. People will often say, well, what should I look for if I'm going to rent a new place? Or, can I sue my landlord or that kind of a thing? And again, you don't have to be an expert, but at least to have a little knowledge and to refer them out as needed to kind of grow your network is great. And then understand the health ramifications within a home. So, yeah, again, the biggest mistake I see practitioners make and clients make is not really understanding mycotoxins, not really understanding that their belongings are affected and they're very difficult to address. So, people, taking their furniture with them to a new space or kind of making mistakes and remediating their own house, um, it's just a big issue. So, a little bit just getting into what's the difference between a mold and a mycotoxin. A mold is like a biological material, like a plant or an animal, except it's a fungus, and it grows. It needs moisture and some kind of organic dead matter to grow. So, there's a lot of organic dead matter in your home. There's books, and then there's dust, and there's wood. There's all sorts of things. There's cloth. And if it's too moist in there for a number of reasons, then mold can grow. So mycotoxins are something that some molds kind of spit out as a byproduct, or maybe they all spit them out. It's like a waste product, like you and I make waste products. Mycotoxins are one of their waste products, and some molds, about 15, make these toxic waste products called mycotoxins. These are not biological material. These are just chemical compounds. So they cannot be killed. And I hear that kind of mistake being made. They can be potentially transformed chemically to a less dangerous or non dangerous compound. But you can imagine if they're deep in a couch or a bed, what have you, it's very difficult to transform something that is that embedded in its food source. So a spore, or excuse me, molds will grow in these little connected areas. They form a colony, and they on the bottom you'll see those. These are called hyphae. Those are little branching things, and those are actually what release enzymes to break down the organic matter, and it's digested externally and sucked back up into the mold. So that's how they're getting food. And then the mycotoxin, it's not exactly a gas, but I guess I kind of picture it as one, but it's a chemical that could be released, but it's not always being released all the time. So there's it depends on the environment and different factors. And this is another sort of mistake I see getting made in our field is people are like, well, I have this kind of mold from my home test, and I have this kind of mycotoxin from my urine test, and I need a binder for it, and like end of story. No, molds are producing all different kinds of mycotoxins, and there are limitations too in testing in what they can pick up. So we may have a slide about this, but um, so for instance, aspergillus and penicillium are sort of easier to find on a test with the testing methods than stachybotrys. But the stachybotrys could be present. It's just not getting picked up on the test. So that's just one example. But I think the practitioners acting like it's sort of a one-to-one relationship or clients kind of assuming it is not correct. So if you have one urine test and one home test out of the 365 days of the year and probably years you've been in this house, you're just getting a little snapshot of what we can find within the limitations of modern testing. So that's really important to understand. I think our brains just want to make sense of things. We want to make order of things. So we deduce things a little too simply. When actually, like this one is saying, there's going to be variations with what's going on in the environment, for example. And here's something I found in an article I thought was so interesting, that there may be a whole second layer of hidden mycotoxins that that are kind of released after the second round that we just haven't even identified yet. So as much as this field is like we're growing, we're learning about it, it's really important to keep a healthy sense of like, we don't know everything yet. And we can't just say A plus B equals C when we're treating a person. So here's some pictures of the different chemical compounds, of some of the compounds of mycotoxins. There are many. I think there's probably in the thousands. And some things that can potentially neutralize mycotoxins are on this list. Um, most of the natural products we see use enzymes, but sometimes we see essential oils or like ozone. But mostly, I want to talk about the last thing on this list, which is your body. So, your body does break down, or how can we say, transform mycotoxins. It can do it. They aren't just free float. I mean, they are free floating. We can talk about that. They can really travel, and that can be a problem. So we've got to get them out of tissue. But as long as they're making it, they're making it to the liver, they're making it to the gut, our bodies do have capacity to deal with them. Even if you say you're MTHFR or whatever you're going to say, like we do have that potential. But we're not a perfect system either. And we can start to break down and not be able to handle them. So, this is just a bit of a reminder about what happens in the liver. So, first in phase one, lipid based toxins are broken up using mostly enzymes. There's a lot of oxidation created in this step. So, that means you need a lot of antioxidants, which you need anyways from the toxic mold. And here's some of the nutrients that are needed for phase one. Also, you need a lot of amino acids. I don't know if that's written on here. It's a little bit more in phase two. So phase two, there's different pathways the body can use to now make these wastes. So they become kind of activated and free in phase one, and then they put in another form for phase two. Most of the mycotoxin study shows it goes down the glucuronidation pathway. So not the methylation pathway, what the people talk about with, being a poor methylator. And then sometimes some of this can happen independently in the gut without being a part of the liver or in other sort of locations. I think I have a slide on that in a minute. And then again, phase three, you've learned about is when it actually exits the body, and we have to be careful with the mycotoxins so that molds are not recycled back with the bile. So that's why we use things like binders and bile movers. So you guys are lucky because last time I gave this talk, I had like 20 more slides where I went down this rabbit hole about testing and how we test mycotoxins. And I think it was a little much. So I'm taking some of that out for you guys. So hopefully you're just kind of getting the big picture here. So this is really interesting. This is a one mycotoxins at the top, and they're saying that they don't see how it's detox in the liver, and then the only known metabolic pathway is a hydrolysis of its side chains. So that's kind of interesting. Another one, they said phase one metabolism does happen, followed by phase two conjugation. So that's not methylation either. That's a different one, resulting in a vast array of metabolites. And this is the part I went down a rabbit hole with because I think what we're actually testing in urine is metabolites of the mycotoxins. So that creates again another layer where things could be like a little bit misinterpreted. So you probably have heard about some of this stuff matching mycotoxins to binders. Again, I think it's really interesting, and um, I think it's great that some of this research is happening. But again, I would caution you to not say it's one to one. Like, oh, we know you have ochre toxins, so we're going to give you X. Well, how do you know for sure they don't have some other mycotoxins, some other molds? You don't know. There's no way you can know from one urine test or one dust test. So this is why I really encourage combo binders, or what's the word, like rotating binders, and then certain probiotics and certain yeasts in the gut can help transform mycotoxins and exit mycotoxins. So there really can be like a pretty wide strategy of things to do to help them exit the body. Okay, the last one, which I guess I sort of got into on that slide, was like clinical knowledge. So some of us, and I came from an acupuncture background, so I really had to learn labs. So I learned them through a friend of mine. I started learning blood labs from Dr. Rita Marie Lescalzo and Dr. Datis Karazian. Those were like my first entry into labs. I learned blood labs, and then I took the FDN course, and I learned, some gut labs and saliva testing. I will say, tests change over time. I think all the tests I learned in FDN have been replaced by different tests. So really, you just want to get familiar with what testing is, how to read it, the background, because things will change over time. So whether or not you're doing, a lot of testing or a little testing or what have you, if you're going to work with mold practitioners, or sorry, clients will probably be bringing you some testing, and it's good to be familiar. And then you're making a protocol based a little bit on their testing, but also just what they're telling you, what their symptoms are, their living situation, their budget, and that kind of a thing. So some of the mistakes I see, I'm going to give you some examples, are just too many supplements, just too much going on, not really understanding the person in front of you, maybe who's elderly or very young, and that they're just not going to be able to do all these things. Um, and then kind of spending the client's money without thinking about what's most important. So that's something we are going to help everybody with. Okay, this was a recent client I had who came to me, and she had years of gut issues, fatigue. She had had like a kidney disease, autoimmune kidney disease. She recently had a bladder infection. Um, I'm just mentioning the bladder stuff because some mycotoxins have a real affinity to the bladder. So that's something to know. But she had, I think, like a health coach friend run a mold for her, and the friend told her that the citrinin was from food, and that she couldn't be from her home. Well, this is just not correct, and it holds the client back to have this kind of misinformation. So, and this woman also had a mold inspector tell her that her house was mold free, even though she's had flooding in the house and stuff like that. So, if I were a less experienced practitioner, I might say, oh, well, like maybe this mold is from somewhere else or whatever. But I'm like, you've been in that house a long time. You've had a lot of these issues. You're still in the house. We see mold in your urine. I'm like, you need to do some further testing to your home. And I feel confident to say that because I know the field well enough. And I'm able to actually give her resources and give her options. And I asked her to send me the report from the mold company. She still hasn't done that, I realize. So it's like I can be her backup, right? I can be like her big sister and be like, no, 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 like there's more going on here. Like, let's dig deeper. And because I have that confidence, she has some confidence to move forward. Okay. So this was a client I saw who was 74 and was definitely exposed to mold, had moved into a new facility. The mold is no longer present, but she's seeing a functional practitioner who is testing her through the roof for all sorts of things, heavy metals, Lyme, da da da, all these supplements on the left and maybe more. The woman is giving her loose stool. It's giving her increased anxiety. She's not leaving the house. I was really disappointed to see this, to be honest. So, when you have a senior client, some of the most important things for them are that they keep moving and they keep socializing. They, working through like all the Lyme and da da da, it's just not really understanding the priorities. So, I talked to this woman's daughter on the phone and I said, like, we need to just cut back a lot and just do things that your mom enjoys that, will support her, will get her out. Um, and, the woman actually said, we're just going to take a complete break and get back to you because everyone was just exhausted with keeping up with this. Her daughter would have to drive over 3 times a day and give her all these supplements. So, again, you gotta kinda read the room, and are you doing more harm than good? That's not what we're here for. I am a big fan going through mold myself to keep it simple because there's so many things you can chase and do, but the body really just wants a clean environment, wants, the gut rebuilt, it wants the immune system boosted. It can get way too complicated, and there's times for that, but it's not all the time. So, I do say, make sure the client is doing the foundational things. And again, you may be a coach who more focuses on the foundational things and works with, their other practitioners to help them figure out their diet and chew their food and stuff like that. Um, and then the symptoms I say because we'll get more into this, but if the client is dealing with something day after day that's really rough, they're covered in hives or they can't sleep at all or they haven't pooped in a week, you've got to deal with that before you start detoxing. That's also irresponsible if you don't deal with that. And then there's always 4 things I do if the client is able to detox that are really simple. And then as they're getting better, sometimes now you're wanting to get in and rebuild systems or perhaps treat some other infections. I just want to share this ridiculous picture of me and my my dog in the ground. So foundations, again, just, not beyond food, making sure they're resting, moving, getting outside, and just emphasizing that that's important. It's not all just about supplements. And then I said, we got to make sure their bowels are moving, they're not in hives, this kind of a thing. So I'll just sort of leave it at that. Some people call some of this opening the detox pathways. Um, I think that there can be different ways to phrase it. You just want to make sure, symptoms or systems are working before you go and try to move toxins. So this is our binder, which does have bile movers and bowel movers in it because so many of our clients were constipated or got constipated from binders. So we decided to kind of just mix it together. Okay, so this is a concept I just developed a few months ago because I was working with clients and I realized these are like the 4 things I always ask them to do. And it's so easy. And I just tell them, like, go do these things regularly. Don't try to mix it up every week. Just be regular, be consistent. And you have to be out of mold, right? Really, I mean, ultimately to heal, you can't still be around mold. But these are the 4 things. And if you don't want to study with us, our practitioner course, we have this free toxic mold protocols ebook on bridgetdanner.com and you can just get it. We also have a gut ebooks, antioxidant ebooks. We have, I don't know, 1,500 blogs. So, we have a lot of free info if you want to go that route. I'm just really happy to have people just learn. Um, Okay, so to get more into, oops, I guess I don't have another slide on this. I'll just talk a bit more about this. That one thing I see that is overemphasized is just glutathione. Glutathione is great. It's the most abundant antioxidant in our body. It's probably going to be depleted in a mold case, but it works in a network with other antioxidants. So the more you can get and the more variety, really the better. And that's a conversation I don't see enough of in this space. It's a big reason we're not feeling well is because of all the oxidative stress. Number two is gut support. It's basically inevitable that mold will affect your gut. So focusing on like rebuilding the gut, and frankly, some of this can happen without testing necessarily. Just putting in beneficial fibers, and we're fans of spore biotics, and then some immunoglobulins perhaps. But I'm always doing some gut support, maybe even digestive enzymes. It's a little different with each case. Maybe we're having some testing, but just to say the gut is important, as we all know, so it needs support during this healing time. And number three is detox techniques, and this can be one thing a day. I usually tell people you have to at least do one a day. If you can do 3 or 4 a day, that's great. And there's a lot of choices. It can be dry brushing, jumping on a trampoline, um, Epsom salt bath, coffee enema, castor oil pack, red light therapy, sauna. There's a million things. Anything that's getting your lymph moving is good, as long as you can handle it, right? We're trying to set you up for success already. We already had those steps. Um, and now we're going to get that lymph moving. And then number four is binders. And we talked a bit about that. There's a lot of options for binders. You can rotate, you can use some of the gut support as a binder. You can, mix in some bile movers in this protocol, but it's pretty simple, right? It's simple. And I think that there's a lot of beauty in just simplifying things for people. Because yes, we could go after Lyme and this and that. And maybe over time we're gonna do some of those things, take out fillings. But there's usually a time where you just kind of like need to put your head down, eat well, sleep well, brush your skin, take your probiotics, and just let the body take that all in and start healing and detoxing. And then again, I'm kind of talked about this, but over time you may want to, go after, I've done parasite cleanses since, and different things like that. Um, and maybe those were critical to my healing. But I will say, like, a lot of it was just, it takes time to rebuild your immune system. For example, like my white blood cell count was still like quite low, maybe a year and a half after mold, a year and a half. So how am I going to fight off like Epstein-Barr when my immune system isn't even working? So in a sense, you can just bring that immune system up with herbs and nutrients. Um, and you may never have to go after the infections, but everybody's probably going to have different lingering symptoms. So I know for me, I had a lot of lingering anxiety that I had to kind of keep treating and treating and treating with lots of different, techniques. So this is the part that you really get to be, a practitioner, whether if you're a naturopath or an acupuncturist or whatever you do, really like just rebuilding this person whose body has taken such a hit. So that's kind of what I would say the later stages. Um, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this course, but if you have any questions about what I said, you're welcome to put them in the chat. So basically everything I just explained is why we created this toxic mold trained course. It's sort of like my next season of my career. Is I really want more people doing this work. I don't, I know I'm not the only one, but sometimes we all feel like the only one. And I just want to see, more and more people out there understanding mold and doing a good job of it. So I know for me, having going through mold was very lonely, and I'm excited. We already have 18, 19 people in the course. It will be really nice to have a group of like-minded people as well. So I'll just go through these briefly. These are the three areas again that we talked about today: environmental knowledge, emotional, clinical skills, and this course is open to anyone. It's at a practitioner level, but it's anyone who's basically interested in really understanding mold. These are the lessons. So it's a live 8 weeks course. I don't know if there's any great point to read all these, but I'll just say we're covering everything we can think of. Um, and then we're giving you some handouts too for clients. So again, there's lots of little nuance and questions people have in this field and little parts they don't understand. And it's just a way to cover it all and be right there for you to ask questions. We'll do case studies. You can bring your own questions from your own mold experience or your clients. So it'll be a lot of fun. So here is the link. I'll put it in the chat too, and you can use this QR code. But here is the juicy part. So the early bird pricing ended like a week ago, but I ended up not getting in to do this webinar with health means until now. So the good part is we're giving you $400 off to bring it back to the early bird price. Bad news is this whole thing closes in a couple days, so you have to kind of make a quick decision. But I'm happy to take questions by email or questions now. We also have a 2 payment option. So you have 2 payments 6 weeks apart, which kind of makes it easier. And I definitely 100% feel like whether it's for your own case or your clients, it's just a great investment because there's a lot of mistakes that can be made. I'll show you. Here's a couple testimonials I can talk about. Um, but I know for me, like I wasted so much money and just not understanding certain things and going down the wrong path. So I really want this course to be like a money saver for people in the end. Um, and we have a bunch of bonuses. I think we have 5 bonuses like from partners of mine. Lab free labs, like a home testing course or home remediation course, environmental toxins module. So we have some really fun stuff. And I'll just say that we really do get great feedback from our clients, and it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to know, like, people, frankly, we get people who come from a lot of other practitioners to us and just really feel heard, feel like we're giving detailed information, which is what I want for all of you. So yeah, I'll put the code in the notes again, but it drops the course price to $800. Um, and yeah, we already have some people in there. I'm so excited. We're working really hard. And since it's live, it can be kind of organic. Like if people are like, I'm really curious about this, can you get more into that? We can do whatever. I'm 100% in here for it. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing. Oops. There we go. Oh, we got some more folks on. Okay. One sec. So I see a question about castor oil packs. This is a program page, and I'll put the coupon code in the chat, and then I'll get back to it. This is from Hems. Where do you apply the castor oil pack? So good question. It can be different places. You can do the liver area, or you can do the gut if someone's going through, acute gut stuff, constipation. Sometimes you can kind of cover both the liver and the gut. But you can also do it like there's a little mini pack you can do on your thyroid. I had someone during COVID do it on their lungs. You can do it to grow your eyebrows. But mostly I would say, liver, belly is the main area. Or for women going through period issues, you can do that lower abdomen. So basically putting it over the area typically like a little focus on the liver. But good question. Yeah, can I talk about personal belongings? Okay. So, these mycotoxin compounds are so tiny, teeny tiny. And again, they feed on organic matter, but they also feed on dust. So if you say like, "Oh my, the inside of my couch is polyester." Well, there's still like dust and hair and skin that's deep in there. And they can be in there just hanging out. So that's why I'm not a big fan of like enzyme treatment that supposedly can penetrate into beds and couches. Now, some companies are going to claim they can do that. I don't feel great about it. So, I just often see, okay, so let me backtrack a little bit, Britt. If a person is very sick and the home's been identified to be a big problem, maybe it has multiple areas of moisture, this kind of scenario, it's pretty difficult to keep your belongings. So another scenario could be, I don't know, let's say you move into like a nice new home and it doesn't have mold, but then you have some plumbing issue that comes up. If that's handled quickly and well, within 48 hours and all the materials are cut out, it's all done correctly, you're not going to lose any belongings. So when I say your belongings are gone, it's more in the scenario of like there was a long-term problem and someone's become quite sick from it. In that case, I but pretty much every time see that when people try to stay with the same belongings, they don't get better or they get sick all over again. So that's why I'm a bigger fan of just oops, um, getting rid of stuff. And I know it's not easy. I know it's expensive, but we went through all of it. I lost all my health books. I lost all my clothes, all our furniture, everything. Another thing you can do temporarily is put some things that you really would like to save in storage and reevaluate them after time. You're probably going to find that there's still a problem, but at least you gave yourself the chance. So, talking about cleaning, things like essential oils and vinegar and water is one thing you can use for cleaning, for like wiping surfaces. Fogging is something that you can do, and it fogs enzymes and will not kill, I did it there, will, what's the word? Disinhibit, transform mycotoxins. Usually fogging though is really just for a cleanup stage, say after you've remediated a room and things have been cleaned and you've gotten rid of some belongings. Usually fogging is just one stage of kind of remediation. It's not really applicable to save all your belongings. So I hope that makes some sense. Let me know if you don't. I'll share another big one because I hear practitioners say this all the time. They're like, "Oh, if you're going through mold, get an air filter." Okay, I did the same thing. That air filter is ruined. It's ruined. So if you want to get an air filter temporarily while you're still in the moldy home, 100% do not bring that to the new home because all the mycotoxins are getting like pulled into the plastic and the machinery and stuff like that. It's a bad idea unless you're just gonna like let it go. So that's another little one that people think, how was the machine? Well, it's got all these nooks and crannies and fans and like it's not it's not great to expose new things to a known moldy home. Same with like buying a sauna. Don't buy a sauna and put it in your same moldy home. Wait till you're in a new home. So those are just a few examples. I hope that helps, Britt. Let me know. Okay, good one, Daniela. So yeah, I mean, again, you can look on some, there's a few practitioners and authors who do publish some, some studies on which which binders fit for which mycotoxins. But in general, you still have to kind of mix them all up and have a variety. Another resource where I think they got a lot of this information was from PubMed, right? And a lot of that came from animal feed. So animals are getting sick or couldn't reproduce because of mold in their feed. So they had to look at what substances they could put in to deal with molds. And that's where a lot of this information came from about binders. So just a little fun background. But yeah, I don't exactly have anything specific for it. I would suggest you might want to look up that one and just see if it's particularly toxic to any systems like kidney toxic or estrogenic or whatever. But again, also just assume you have other molds and look at your own symptoms and what you're dealing with. And then generally, like, detox the whole body. And if there's a certain system that needs more support, like your kidneys, like, focus on that. Yeah. So I hope that helps too. Okay. Here's a good follow up question. Supposedly, wood can be cleaned up. Again, I don't really buy it because you really would have to ideally sand it down and refinish it. So that's a lot of work. But again, if you have like a very minor case, maybe you're fine. But if you're really sick, I mean, we put some of our wooden furniture in storage, our whole dining set. No, we just ended up getting rid of it. So humidifiers, yeah, same, Colleen. They would be affected. Okay. Yeah, so this is where we get into like a little um gray area, Gladys, but this is a really good question. So some things you can do that will help the space while they're still in mold that don't ruin new things are open windows, wet wet dust, and use things like thieves oil, essential oils, or vinegar and water. Or I'll put this in the chat, the decon 30 is a really good, like, tested natural cleaning agent. You can use it in a fogger or wiping. So open windows, mop, wet dust, HEPA vacuum, get rid of clutter. There's a lot of stuff we have we just don't even need, so start just getting rid of clutter. You can burn these little things, candles. They're called EC candles, and those have some essential oils in them. Again, these things are temporary though. So could they start protocols? A little bit. You can certainly, you could be doing those four things I talked about, but I wouldn't say, oh, you're going to get healed. And I wouldn't do more intensive protocols because it's kind of a waste of money. You'll never really get better if you're still in the mold. So this is where you can try to build with your client like a transitional plan. If they need to stay in that space or don't see a way out or whatever, then that space is going to have to be pretty thoroughly rehabbed if the client has been really affected. But that's where some of the testing companies could tell you the severity of the mold. There's a company or a service called ERMI Code, and they'll evaluate your ERMI with the software and let you know like how bad it is, type of thing. So it does again kind of depend on the case, right? Like if you have a senior and they're like literally like immunocompromised and can barely breathe and whatnot because of mold, they need to just get out. But if it's more like, oh, well, they're having some digestive stuff and some brain fog, ultimately they need a mold free environment, but maybe, you can work with it. Maybe they don't spend as many hours at home. Maybe they sit outside more depending on the weather. So I think just be aware, Gladys, like we're sort of just treading water health wise while we're still in the mold, but we can clean up the house somewhat and you clean up the body somewhat, but ultimately there's going to have to be, a bigger remediation. And that was true in my case. Like I didn't know I had mold, so I kept staying in the home and I kept doing more and more and more and more to get better. But I only got worse because I just couldn't handle being there anymore. So I hope that one helps. I think Angelo had a little similar question. Can an older home be mold or mycotoxin free? I mean, I think it can be low, right? Like really over time, depending on where you live. I mean, every home is going to have water damage. And the older it is, the more it's probably been through. So I live in Phoenix and my house is newer. So when I have water damage issues here, they dry really fast. Um, and I feel good in my home. If I ran some testing, I don't know, they might see some little bit of toxin, maybe, but my home is like 30 years old and it feels fine. My home in Portland was 100 years old and had additions and had some like self built stuff. It had, we were like bad homeowners, like about stuff like drainage in our gutters. We didn't run a dehumidifier. So it was an old home with lots of problems and they weren't visible. That's another thing to remember. Like 90% and mold, maybe 95 is not visible. It's like in the walls or it's under the floorboards or stuff like that. So an older home could be safe. I've stayed, my brother has a 100-year-old home in Massachusetts with a basement and it rains a lot, but I feel really good there. So I think it just depends on the home. I do talk about this in my book, like using your five senses to evaluate the home. Usually you cannot run, I guess it depends on the market, but you usually cannot run a test while you're in like escrow or whatever it's called. Um, so you kind of have to do more of like an evaluation. So we will talk about this in the course. Mickey's going to go over room by room, like assessing. But if like, again, the course doesn't call to you right now, here, one sec. I also have this book. I cover that whole question in here. And it's on Amazon for $20. So it's a good resource if you're wanting to learn this, like, but you're not in a big rush. You can just sort of curl up with it in bed over time. Good question. Okay, I'm just going to answer these last couple questions and then we'll sign out. But Hem says has a high ERMI, two areas that need to be remediated. Should I call an industrial hygienist to check the house before doing another ERMI? I've never heard the term industrial hygienist, but yeah, I was like, again, after remediation, cleaning and then fogging, and then I would add decluttering, are important steps. And sometimes you need to clean the HVAC system and put in like fungicide. So I don't know that exact term, but those would be the steps I would recommend. And then I'm personally like partial to the dust test. That's one brand, but the ERMI was not designed for this type of use. So it's not the best test in a lot of ways. So I like a test that includes mycotoxins because those are what's make, yes, the load of mold can make you sick, but the mycotoxins are very powerful. So I like to include a mycotoxin test. So that might be something to just consider, like maybe 3 months after you finish the job, Hems, is to just, make sure that mycotoxins are, very low or not detectable anymore. Okay, I guess I missed a question earlier, so I'll take your question too. Okay, Gladys, I'm just going to touch on this one briefly, but this depends if you're a renter or a homeowner. If you're a home, I guess either party could run some like the dust test I just mentioned or plate tests just to get an idea. But that won't tell you where the mold came from. You need to get a mold inspector if you own the home. So I'll answer this one because it's sort of close to my heart. How do you get your family on board getting rid of belongings? Well, yeah, I understand it's an emotional component. I was sort of lucky that my husband at the time was an engineer, so he was not very emotional. So he was just like, this has to go. But, one technique is, like I said, putting it in a temporary storage because usually after they've been in there a while, you can feel how strong you're affected. Um, another I mean, I guess another approach is just get them more educated. So, I have a whole chapter in my book and a whole unit in this course where I talk about how mold affects the body, how mycotoxins affect the body, how they travel in the body, and this is backed up. This is not my opinion. Like I don't even know, thousands of citations in the book. Like it affects your body. So it's tough because we know like cancer is very serious, right? Like we know that as a culture. And we know like if your house burns down, you don't have a house. But mold, we can't see it usually. It's not well understood. So there's like an educational barrier, really. Um, and sometimes truly it's having like somebody else have the conversation with your family, or maybe there's a video they would watch, or again like read my book. Like I have had people say, I'm so glad like my husband read some of your book and he gets it now. Or we've had couples and families come into us and they're going through this dynamic of not totally believing the other person in the family. Luckily Mickey tends to get this situations. um, Sometimes like an outs we can hear it better from an outside source, and then sometimes you can just get rid of things like in stages, and not all at once. Like probably you're going to be a lot eventually you need to get rid of, but like I know like we sort of got through things and got rid of things in stages, and that did kind of help me. um so I hope that helps. And another thing that I get asked about is like, it's not like everything has to necessarily like be burned. Like if you give one book or one sweater that you've washed to like a friend, it's not going to ruin their health or their house, right? It's just hard for you because you've been around it so incredibly long. So maybe that helps a little bit too. Yeah, Val said it's an educational barrier. Yeah, this is where it gets hard. Um, so yeah, it's definitely tough, but I do see the awareness growing. And if you guys want to come and be a part of this course, same thing, like the awareness will grow. Um, Now, if I like chit chat in an Uber and I say, I moved to Arizona because of mold, they're like, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. I don't think that used to be the case. So, but I understand when it's your own family and your own belongings, it's more tender. Okay, so I put the HEMS, they will give you instructions for how to dust test. You actually collect samples from like all over the place. That's why it doesn't tell you if an area is fixed, but it tells you if there's still a presence of mold or mycotoxins. And I'll put the coupon code in. And again, if you want to email me any questions, I'll be sending out this video as a replay, because I know everyone couldn't make it live. But yeah, hopefully it gives you a sense of, we definitely have a lot of resources for you and are here to support you. And I'm just so thankful for people who came on live. It was a lot of fun. Just like so happy that people are learning about this stuff and getting better. So yeah, you're welcome, Colleen. Thanks everyone for being on here. Have a great evening. I'll be in touch. Thank you, Val.